Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K. Anil Kumar, Assistant Professor, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Today we are going to discuss about the module Industrialization and Tribe under paper Tribal Cultures of India. So students, let us see what we are going to learn from this module. First of all, we will try to understand the industrialization in relation to tribal people of India. Second, we will be able to assess both the positive and negative socio-economic impacts of industrialization upon tribal people. Third, to highlight the problems and challenges of tribes who are being marginalized because of industries. Fourth, the module at the end we will reflect upon recent conflict over natural resources which are going to affect the future of industrialization in tribal areas. So, industrialization is a process of increased emphasis on mechanized production of goods and services through industry. In an industrial society, majority of population work in factories and offices rather than domestic subsistence activities. The term industry refers to the organized activity and specialized division of labor among the participants in production process. This means, in this sense, the industry could be used to refer to the archaeological stone tool industry or to the present day fishing or agricultural industry as well. However, what we are going to discuss in this module refers to the particular kind of industrial development which started in Europe in 18th century and was called Industrial Revolution. It was directed towards large scale production of goods for commercial purpose. This use of science and technology in advanced human skill basic necessity for this kind of industrial revolution. This phenomena was new and capable of transforming the life of people in a greater scale. This attracted attention not only of economists but also social thinkers like Marx and Durkheim. They studied the impact of industrial economy on society and culture of industrializing Europe. These thinkers were skeptical of industrial transformation as they believed that it benefits the capitalist and alienate the working class. The industrialization by the mid 20th century becomes inevitable for achieving modern lifestyle like West. For anthropological purpose, industrialization implies to the socio-economic changes arising out of industrial mode of economic production, and anthropologists inquire the impact of industrial economy on traditional subsistence economy and how it transcends the other aspects of culture. The early anthropologists have paid scant attention to the process of industrialization as an economic activity affecting life of simple non-industrial people. The industrial anthropology has developed as a field of inquiry in recent time that has directed it focuses upon various dimensions of socio-cultural realities within the industrial setup. This field has extended its research priorities on studies of work culture in industry, labor relation and trade unions, issues of human resources and class dynamics in industry. The second important aspect is to study the impact of industry on external realities of societies and culture. What kind of changes it brings to the traditional societies and whether these impacts have been positive or negative for the people. Industrialization in India. Here we will discuss about industrialization in ancient period, medieval period, British period and post-colonial India. Now we will discuss one by one. India's subcontinent has been industrial growth from the ancient time. There are strong evidences of knowledge of weaving 1500 BC. During the medieval period, several large-scale monuments were built which provide the early glimpse of industrial progress of construction industry. The use of wood, stone, bronze, brass, silver, copper, iron, dyeing, printing, ivory carving and pottery etc. highlight the industrial nature of regional past. The Industrial Revolution in Europe resulted in factories and mechanized production. The process of imperialism and colonization laid the foundation of commercial and later on industrial towns in various colonies like India. However, a process of deindustrialization started in Indian subcontinent. The British industrial boom adversely affected the cotton and silk factories of India. From the 19th century onwards, the British encouraged setting of factories in India. The most important among them was tea plantation in Assam. The establishment of cotton textile mills in Mumbai in 1854 and jute mills in Kolkata in 1855 were major industrial foundations in India. The mineral extraction based industries started to evolve during the beginning of 20th century. During the World War periods, heavy chemical ordnance and aircraft production started to meet the immediate requirements of war. Steel, sugar and cement industries were also established before independence. The major advancement in industrialization of country was possible only after independence in 1947. The government of India took mixed economy as its policy for 5-year planning model to embark upon the road of economic progress. Both public and private sectors were involved in setting up industries to increase production. However, agriculture remained major employer in economy till date. It was argued that to remain viable as a country, the nation has to increase the contribution of industrial sector in gross domestic production. In 1991, government announced the new industrial policy to bring economic reform and liberalization in the country. The privatization of industries became a trend and foreign companies and investments started to come in the country. Industrialization and tribe. In this section, we will talk about tribal areas, richness of resources and industrialization. The industrialization has impacted the Indian populace and several studies have been conducted across the discipline to highlight the significance of industry for economy of country. However, the country has a section of society who was categorized as a tribe has traditionally been dependent upon pre-agricultural mode of production and very lately learned the agricultural activities. These people who have traditionally lived in hilly and forested areas choose to earn their livelihood by practicing subsistence activities like hunting gathering, fishing, pastoralism, shifting cultivation and sedentary horticulture. They survived on natural product available and relied on very few tools and instruments for economic protections. Further, In this section, we also discuss about impact of industrialization on tribe. The land and areas where these tribes used to live were started to identify as rich in mineral and fuel resources. These resources were primary requirement for the newly industrializing nation. The major industries choose to develop near mineral richness areas so that they can have access to these primary resources. This area also witnessed simultaneously growth of township and urban centers around the industry necessary for living of workforce near the manufacturing site. The places were actively connected by roads and railways to facilitate easy transportation of goods to the market. This kind of industrial come urban development has been central to the understanding of impact of industrialization on tribes of India. Most of the researches which were conducted by anthropologists and social scientists look at the twin processes and its impact. However, there is a separate literature to discuss the emergence of non-industrial urban center and its impact on tribes of India. Particularly in northeast part of India, there is a very few industrial urban centers. The urbanization in that area has been largely because of other reasons and has subsequent impact on tribal life. Anthropology, industry and tribes in India. Here we'll discuss how anthropological studies contributed in this particular area. Anthropologists have taken considerable interest in the study of industrialization as socio-cultural process and its impact upon tribal population. The industrial anthropology as a specialization emphasizes the first hand fieldwork tradition to grasp the complexity of industrial life. Martin Oran wrote one of the earliest paper titled A Tribal People in Industrial Setting in India in his book Structure and Change in Indian Society, edited by Milton Singer, to highlight the impact of industrialization setup in Jamshedpur and its impact upon Santal people. In this study, it deals with economic issues like labor requirement and cultural issues like religion and marriage affected by industry. He later on published a book length inquiry, The Santal, a tribal in search of great tradition, to discuss his findings in detail. This anthropological study also covers a historical depth of 60 years since establishment of TISCO in 1907 and gives detailed account of assimilation process impacting the tribal life. A.M. Kurub in 1961 in his studies of Parasia coal mines of Madhya Pradesh reflected on the changing economy of tribal because of industrialization in the area. In two papers, he discussed the socio-cultural condition of Gond people of Madhya Pradesh working in coal mines. The paper also reflects upon the loss of moral values and traditional culture in industrial laborers. Another anthropologist, T.R. Sharma, in his paper dealt with the labor issues like absenteeism in factory of tribal workers. This study is interesting because it has studied the workers' motivation and alienation. The study has identified the establishment of TISCO has uprooted 18 villages of Bhumij, Hos, Santal and Hindus. However, these people have been accommodated in newly established bastis of mixed population. These bastis have attracted migrant workers, tribal and non-tribal, from neighboring districts and states as well. The study highlights the disintegration of cultural life, forest ecology and agricultural economy. Impact of industrialization on tribe. Here we talk about positive and negative impact of industrialization on tribe. That is, economic changes, socio-cultural impacts, migration, exploitation as a laborer, displacement. Now we will discuss one by one. Economic changes. The tribal economy has largely been affected by industrial growth in the form of them being pulled to unskilled laborer work to industries. Some scholars have emphasized the compulsion on part of tribals to take these jobs for getting money. The monetized economy has changed the consumption pattern and materialistic possession of tribal communities. The dependence on agriculture has decreased to considerable extent. There is tendency toward the cultivation of vegetables and collection of forest produce for selling at market nearby industrial towns. In socio-cultural impacts, the family value has changed. The religious rituals have also been compromised. Some of the industrial workers living in town have become more attracted to Christianity. Tribal women have also suffered lots of problems because of industrial growth. In migration from rural to urban industrial center, the migration of tribal from rural area to urban industrial center was important change. The advent of industry brought ownership with, with it. Many tribals kept living in the industrial land in Jugis even after being evacuated. The life in Jugis was pitiable, though tribal were forced to live nearby settlements to work in industry. Some tribals also migrated from one industrial site to other along with their contractors, and a situation is bonded industrial laborer existed. In exploitation as a labor class in industry, the tribals were more affected. The tribal mostly got job as a laborer and have been paid less wages by contractors. The sense of alienation prevailed in industrial setup and tribals felt demotivated to work for industry. The exploitation of laborers by contractors has been reported in several studies. Whereas in displacement, most of the tribals impacted the social life. That the industrialization has been one of the primary reasons for the displacement of the tribals from their land. The loss of land means loss of livelihood. Tribal economy has largely been dependent upon the land-based activities. There is no accurate data that how many tribals have been displaced because of industrial growth, but studies mention above the highlighted the disposition of land and poor rehabilitation and resettlement policy towards tribal. Most of the studies have given primary attention to the problem of displacement, but voices against industrialization have never been documented. The studies have mostly outlined the lacunae in resettlement policies, and remedies have been suggested for smooth displacement strategy. Now we will discuss industrialization from regional perspective. If you look from the regional perspective, there is uneven spread of industrialization in different parts of India. The central India is dominated by extraction based industries because of early exploration of minerals in this area. The major industrial development took place in this tribal dominated region. The demographic features of the region changed because of migration of caste communities from neighboring areas and different parts of the country. In Northeast Indian population, industry started as early as 1835 in Assam region by East India Company. This resulted into migration of huge tribes from central India into the region for plantation labor. The industry was labor intensive and generate de-employment for more than 11 lakh people. After independence, steadily many industries like plywood, aluminium, tea, rubber, fertilizers, etc. have also come up. The Garo hills of Meghalaya have seen growth of mineral industry. hydel power projects, the handicap and handloom industry in recent years. Very few studies of industrialization have been conducted in the context of tribal of South India. The states of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka have seen industrialization in various pockets. However, their impacts on tribal communities have not been assessed properly. In Western India, the states of Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Rajasthan have seen recent industrial growth. Especially, special economic zones have been created in the states to facilitate industrialization. The tribal groups have suffered problems, but anthropologists have paid scant attention to inquire the impact on tribal population in these areas. Impact of industrialization on tribes. So many anthropologists have studied the impact of industrialization on tribe. For example, A.K. Das and H.N. Banerjee made a study impact of industrialization on the life of tribals of West Bengal in the areas of Bengal where heavy industries like Chittaranjan locomotives, Hindustan Cable Factory and Durgapur Steel Plant have displaced Santal and other communities. A.K. Das and H.N. Banerjee in a further studies impact of tea industry on the life of the tribals of West Bengal. Tribal They have discussed their findings under economic, social and psychological impact of tea industry on the tribal laborers in 4 medium sized tea estates of North Bengal region. These early studies set the trend for future work in industrial anthropology. Professor L.P. Vidyarthi pioneered of the study of industrial complexes in Middle India at Anthropology Department of Ranchi University, and many his students took initiative to study and restudy the industrial growth in tribal dominated Chota Nagpur region. This region was one of the areas which shows industrial potential as early as 1856 when the British started coal mining in Jharia, Bokharo, Kanpura and Dhanbad region. Several PhD students were produced PhD theses in Ranchi University Anthropology Department which dealt with the impact of industrialization on tribal and village people of those days in Bihar. The study of heavy electric corporation in Ranchi, but Ratu industrial complex like R. Singh, Jayant Shankar, A.C. Mishra, they studied in Jamshedpur Steel City, Jaharia coalfield were prominent among them. Vidyarthi in his study of HEC industrial complex described the situation in terms of changing style of life from rural to urban, homogeneous to heterogeneous. He identifies that initially when industrial project took up, the tribal have to face several difficulty of displacement, but after establishment of firm, they have discovered economic opportunity and hope for urban industrial life. Ruifil, a German research scholar, studied the impact of Raukela on tribals for his doctoral thesis at University of Bonn was associated with the department during this period. Many other studies have been conducted at various institutional universities level. Like Anthropological Survey of India also gave its attention to industrialization and few studies were published in relation to industrialization of tribals in Bengal. One of them, Sukumar Banerjee, in his study Impact of Industrialization on the Tribal Population of Jaharia, Raniganj, coalfield areas, has given detailed account of Santal community affected and incorporated by colonials. The data discuss the division of labor inside factory and contribution made by Santals in different kind of work. He classified the tribal works as daily commuters, original inhabitants and migrants depending upon their mobility. B.K. Roy Burman conducted a study on Rourkela steel plant of Orissa. He conducted a survey of tribal economy and assessed the deployment of tribals in industrial sector. He described the challenges of resettlement of tribal that were displaced because of steel plant. A.R.N. Srivastava in his book Tribal Encounter with Industry, a case study from central India, has studied Bailadila mining complex in Chhattisgarh for understanding the impact of mining in areas. The study was conducted under a project of Ministry of Home Affairs to assess the impact of mines on tribal economy. The report detailed the census and household economy data and the impact of bears because of industrial growth in this region. Gerard Hughes, a French scholar who did his fieldwork in 1996 to 87 in the Dhan collieries, published Workers of Another World, Miners, the Countryside and Coalfields in Dhanbad. This book is dedicated ethnographic work which attempts to highlight the life of mine workers in and out of mine in Marxist Wani. It problematizes the labor as important aspect of mining ethnography and revolves around workers' struggle within the mine establishments. Industrialization and after. Here we discuss about changes after the establishment of industrialization in tribal areas, that is post-industrial society, late industrialism and ecological changes, indigenous rights and resources. The industrialization as a process has changed itself in its form. The industrialization is entering into the era of globalization. The industries which were largely public sector undertakings are now mostly privatized. The liberalization of economy has opened the gate for foreign-based corporations to operate in country. The government has affirmative policy of reservation in jobs, but private sectors undertakings are not incorporating 7.5 reservation policy in recruitment of tribals. The nature of industrial work is very much transformed and service-based industries are on the rise of different part of the country. The IT and BPO sector are on the growth and many of manufacturing industries in India are struggling to sustain its economic viability. The sociologist Daniel Bell has called the new service-based industrial society as post-industrial society. The post-industrial situation is posing other kind of dilemma for tribal people of India. The educated tribal are getting jobs in these industries at the cost of migration from homeland to urban spaces like Delhi, Bangalore and Mumbai. Present movement of tribals to urban industrial center is different from industries reaching to tribal areas. There there are the scholars who highlighted the negative impact of industrial growth on local environment. The agenda of industrial waste and industrial pollution is echoing from every industrial center. The world is facing unprecedented challenges of industry-induced environmental changes. The industrial production processes are spilling hazardous gas, sewage, and several non-decomposable wastes polluting air, water, and food. The industrial waste management practices and promises are unsustainable and unreliable. The anthropologist Kim Fortune, who studied Bhopal gas disaster, calls this phase as late industrialism. She advocates for different ethnographic approach to deal with emergent complexities of late industrialism. Tribal people who were always at the receiving end of industrial challenges with every little benefit accruing to them are now disillusioned by promises of industrial growth. The tribals, empowered by global network of civil society and indigenous consciousness, are challenging any new industrial project in their area. This has become possible because of increased awareness of industrial damage caused to local economy and ecology. The civil society has played prominent role in providing forums to the tribals to raise their concern against industries. The government has made it mandatory to conduct environment impact assessment and social impact assessment before acquiring land for industrial project. The corporate have also taken several initiatives to amend policies and practices for sustainable industrial growth. Many reforms have been made by the Government of India after industrialization. The Government of India has reformed laws to protect the interests of tribals in land and forest. However, to increase the job opportunity and economic progress, the Government of India has also identified special economic zones for creating industrial hub. This would be interesting to find out how many special economic zones directly impact the tribal population. The most important thing to understand is that most of the industrialization in India has been designed under the aspiration of larger political economy to benefit the whole country as a nation, which will also integrate the tribals in its fold. However, this policy has largely resulted into marginalization of tribals further. The tribal directed industrial planning has never been part of Government of India strategy. The issues of tribal rights, the natural resources have become prominent in the tribals belt and people have started to oppose the forced industrialization in the regions. The tribal communities are challenging the industries for better compensation and job opportunities and sometimes even for no industrialization at all. Felix Fadel and Samendra Das wrote Out of This Earth 2011 on issue of bauxite mining project in Odisha is best example of tribal challenge to further industrialization in the area. Thus, the nature of tribe industry encounter has changed drastically over the years. The expectation of industry led growth has not been fulfilled and there is a strong protest of any new industrial project in the tribal areas. Very few tribal elites have benefited from industrialization and majority of tribal communities are at receiving end of industrial blow to the local ecology and economy. So students, let us see what we have learned in this module. I hope that we have learned about the industrialization process in India and how industries have entered into tribal regions and spoiled their life like for displacement because of industries. So these are all industrial and tribal problems we have studied in this module. But in brief, I will explain you what exactly we have studied in this particular module. That is, industrialization is a process of increased emphasis on mechanized production of goods and services through industry. For anthropological purpose, industrialization implies to the socio-economic changes arising out of industrial mode of economic production. Anthropologists inquire the impact of industrial economy in traditional subsistence economy and how it has transcended the other aspects of culture. The The major advancement in industrialization of country was possible only after independence in 1947. The government of India took mixed economy as its policy for 5 years planning model to embark upon the road of economic progress. Both public and private sectors were involved in setting up of industries to increase the production. Anthropologists have taken considerable interest in the study of industrialization as socio-cultural process and its impact upon the tribal population. The industrial anthropology as a specialization emphasizes the first hand fieldwork tradition to grasp the complexity of industrial life. If we look at from the regional perspective, there is uneven spread of industrialization in different parts of India. The central India is dominated by extraction based industries because of early exploration of minerals in this area. The studies in industrialization have largely discussed the hope for positive changes in tribal life. These studies mostly focus upon the industrial benefits of mining projects on tribal communities who needed to be developed to be fully integrated into mainstream India. The studies highlighted the problems of displaced, but the interest was to look at the changing dynamics of tribal economy, which will ultimately bring the prosperity in the tribal areas. However, the anthropological studies also highlighted the disorganization of tribal life and negative impacts of industrialization. The industrialization is entering into the era of globalization. The industries which were largely public sector undertaking are now mostly privatized. Then there are scholars who have highlighted the negative impact of industrial growth on local environment. The agenda of industrial waste and industrial pollution is echoing from every industrial center. Very few tribal elites have benefited from industrialization, and majority of the tribal communities are at the receiving end of industrial blow to the local ecology and economy. Thank you.